The Indian philosopher Jaddu Krishnamurti once remarked that observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence. When I first read this statement, I couldn't quite understand why he thought this was so important. Then I realized that I had trouble doing this, and I also recalled studies that I had read in university about dangerous forms of thinking, such as racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and how people who think in that way cannot make this separation between observation and evaluation. They mix up their interpretations with facts. An example of how not being able to make clear observations gets in the way of our resolving our differences peacefully occurred one time when I was working with an elementary school staff. This staff was having a lot of problems communicating with their principal. They didn't like working with him. The tension in the school was so great that parents were making complaints about the atmosphere in the school, so the superintendent asked if I could help out, and the plan was I would meet first with the staff and find out what was bothering them, and then get them together with the administrator. So in the time that I was with the teachers, I asked them this question to begin with. I said, "It's been brought to my attention that you and the school administrator are not getting along too well. And it would help me to contribute to getting things working better if you could tell me specifically what is he doing or not doing that's difficult for you to live with." So I was asking them for clear observations. What is he doing or not doing? But instead of getting the answer to my question, I got an analysis back from one of the teachers. When I asked, "What does the administrator do?" he said, "He has a big mouth." Notice I didn't ask him, what size mouth does the administrator have? I asked him what the administrator did. I pointed out this discrepancy between my question and his answer and asked him if he could be more specific, what the administrator did that he was referring to as having a big mouth. He couldn't do it. Everything that came to him was a criticism, analysis, judgment of the administrator. A teacher nearby, seeing him struggle with this, says, "Well, I know what he's talking about." I said, "Well, fine, help him out. What does the administrator do?" And this second person said, "He talks too much." I said, "I'd like you to see that I would say that talks too much is another evaluation. It's not an observable behavior. It's mixing in what he does with how you interpret it. I'm confident we'll be able to communicate a lot better if we can begin communication with him by being specific. What does he do that makes it hard for you to be around him?" Another teacher said, "He wants to be the center of attention all the time." No, that's telling me what you guess he wants. Even if it's accurate, it's a diagnosis. It's not a description of what he does. Another teacher said, "Well, he thinks he's the only one that has anything worth saying." I said, again, there's another diagnosis. One of the teachers then said, "Boy, that's hard to do." And then I quoted to them the quote I just gave about Krishnamurti, saying how hard it is given how we've been programmed to think, to keep separate observation and evaluation. With my help, they finally came up with some observations, one of which was this, that during their weekly staff meetings, that no matter what was on the schedule, he would relate it to war experiences he had had. He would tell childhood experiences and other stories, and as a result, the staff meetings lasted at least 20 minutes longer than they were scheduled. I said, "Has anyone ever called this to his attention, that specific behavior?" And they could see immediately that when they had tried to talk to him about this, they had mixed in words like talks too much and so forth, and he got defensive when they did that. So I suggested we meet with him and they try to be specific in this meeting about what he does that they don't like. When we did get together for the meeting, I saw rather quickly what they were talking about, because no matter what seemed to come up, the administrator would start to say, "That reminds me of a time," and he would go on and start to tell some stories, and I was waiting for the staff to confront him with what we had talked about, that they bring this to his attention, that when he does this, it didn't meet their needs. But instead of people communicating verbally with him, I saw a lot of nonverbal communication going on. people rolled their eyes and looked at each other, poked each other in the ribs as though to communicate, there he goes again. And they looked at their watches and yawned, and finally I said, "Isn't somebody going to say something?" There was a painful silence for a moment, and then the gentleman who spoke up in our first meeting looked at the administrator and said, "You have a big mouth." So I obviously hadn't been clear about how to express clear observations and not mix them up with evaluations. But with my help, they did clearly let him know what he did that they didn't like, and he was very glad to get that information. He was just unaware that that was bothering people to this degree.